My brother grabbed the microphone at my wedding reception and announced to 200 guests that I was worthless, that I'd manipulated my way into marrying above my station, and that everyone should know the truth about who I really was. The room went silent. My new husband stood frozen. But then Marcus walked to the front, took the mic, and said 5 words that changed everything. What he revealed about my brother that night didn't just save my marriage, it exposed a secret that had been destroying our family for 20 years. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The morning of my wedding dawned crisp and clear in Asheville, North Carolina. October light filtered through the tall windows of the bridal suite at the Grove Park Inn, casting everything in that golden glow that makes you believe in magic. I stood before the antique mirror, watching my mother-in-law-to-be, Patricia Holbrook, adjust the pearl buttons on my grandmother's vintage lace dress. My name is Celine Novak, and until that morning, I thought I knew exactly who I was. 28 years old, assistant marketing director at a small nonprofit, the girl who grew up in a cramped apartment above her father's auto repair shop on the wrong side of Charlotte. The girl who somehow caught the attention of Marcus Holbrook, whose family name graced buildings throughout the Carolinas, and whose trust fund could have bought my entire childhood neighborhood twice over. Patricia stepped back, her manicured, hands clasped together. The dress fit perfectly, hugging my waist before flowing into a chapel train that seemed to go on forever. My mother had worn this dress in 1995, and her mother before that in 1968. It was the only piece of family history worth preserving, my mother always said, though I never understood why she kept it locked in a cedar chest for so many years. "You look radiant, darling," Patricia said, though her smile seemed strained. She'd been trying so hard to accept me into the family, but I could see the effort it took. I wasn't the debutante daughter-in-law she'd probably envisioned for her. Only son. No cotillion background, no sorority connections, no family money to speak of. Just Celine from the repair shop, who met Marcus when her beat-up Honda broke down outside his law firm 3 years ago. My maid of honor, Jessica Chen, burst through the door with an armload of white roses and baby's breath. She'd been my roommate since college, the one person who knew all my insecurities and loved me anyway. Her face lit up when she saw me in the dress. "Celine, you're going to make Marcus cry the moment he sees you," she said, carefully pinning a sprig of baby's breath into my dark hair. "I still can't believe you're marrying into the Holbrook family. Remember when we used to drive past their estate and dream about what it would be like to live behind those iron gates?" I laughed, but it felt hollow. The truth was, I still felt like that girl driving past the gates. Even after 3 years with Marcus, even after he proposed with his grandmother's ring in front of half of Charlotte's elite at the country club, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was playing dress-up in someone else's life. My phone buzzed on the vanity. A text from my brother Trevor. "Running late, but I'll be there. Promise." My stomach tightened. Trevor had been distant for months, ever since Marcus and I announced our engagement. He'd missed the engagement party, claiming he had to work. Missed the rehearsal dinner last night, saying his car broke down. But he was my only family left since Dad died 2 years ago, and I needed him there. He was supposed to walk me down the aisle. Jessica noticed my expression. "Everything okay?" "Just Trevor being Trevor," I said, trying to sound casual. "You know how he is with commitment." But that wasn't entirely fair. Trevor had raised me after Dad's accident, working double shifts at the shipping company to keep us afloat. He was only 6 years older than me, but he'd sacrificed his 20s so I could go to college. The least I could do was forgive him for being uncomfortable around Marcus's world. Patricia excused herself to check on the flowers downstairs, leaving Jessica and me alone. The room fell quiet, except for the distant sound of guests arriving. On the lawn below, through the window, I could see white chairs arranged in perfect rows facing an archway draped in climbing roses. The mountains rose in the distance, their peaks touched with early autumn colors. "Nervous?" Jessica asked, applying a final touch of lipstick to my lips. "Terrified," I admitted. "What if I'm making a mistake? What if I don't belong in his world?" Jessica turned me to face her, her expression serious. "Celine, Marcus chose you, not because of your family or your bank account, but because of who you are. Don't let anyone make you feel less than worthy of that love." A knock interrupted us. Marcus's best man, his college roommate David Preston, poked his head in. "Ladies, sorry to interrupt, but we're about to start. Celine, your brother just arrived. He's downstairs getting his boutonniere pinned on." Relief flooded through me. Trevor had made it. Whatever was bothering him, he'd put it aside for my wedding day. The next hour passed in a blur of final preparations. Patricia returned with the photographer, a stern woman named Helen, who positioned us for what felt like hundreds of shots. My hands shook slightly as I held my bouquet. White peonies and garden roses tied with my mother's pearl bracelet wrapped around the stems. "Something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue," Jessica recited, straightening my pearl earrings. "Your grandmother's dress, your new life with Marcus, the bracelet borrowed from your mother's memory, and..." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small blue ribbon. "For your bouquet. I know it's silly, but I wanted to make sure you had everything." Tears pricked my eyes. Jessica had been the sister I never had, the one who helped me navigate college applications when Dad was too overwhelmed, who drove me to my first job interview, who held me when Marcus's parents made me feel like an outsider at family dinners. "Time to go, beautiful," Helen announced, checking her watch. "Your groom is waiting." We made our way downstairs, my train carefully managed by two of Marcus's young cousins who'd been recruited as flower girls. The hotel's grand staircase curved down to the main floor, where guests in their finest autumn attire mingled with champagne, flutes, and nervous laughter. I spotted Trevor immediately. He stood near the French doors leading to the ceremony space, tugging at his tie with obvious discomfort. He'd borrowed the suit from somewhere, and it didn't quite fit his broader frame. His dark hair, so similar to mine, was slicked back, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. When he saw me, his expression changed. For a moment, the hardness that had settled over his features in recent months melted away, and he looked like the big brother who used to braid my hair and help me with homework at the kitchen table. "Hey, little sister," he said, his voice rough. Don't you dare make me cry," I warned, but I was smiling. "This makeup took an hour." He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Ready for this?" I nodded, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. Through the glass doors, I could see the guests taking their seats. Marcus's family filled the first several rows on the right side, their pearls and navy blazers a sea of inherited confidence. My side was sparser, populated by work friends, college roommates, and a few neighbors from the old apartment complex. The disparity wasn't lost on me, and I knew it wasn't lost on Trevor either. He'd always been sensitive about our place in the world, our father's grease-stained hands and our second. The ceremony itself unfolded like something from a magazine. Marcus stood at the altar in his charcoal gray suit, his blonde hair catching the afternoon light as he watched me walk down the rose-petal-strewn aisle. When our eyes met, his face broke into that crooked smile that had first made me forget my own name 3 years ago, in that law firm parking lot. Trevor's arm felt steady beneath mine as we processed between the rows of guests. I could hear cameras clicking, the soft rustle of silk and chiffon as people turned to watch. But something nagged at me as we walked. Trevor's breathing seemed shallow, and twice I felt him stumble slightly, as if he wasn't entirely focused on our measured steps. Judge Patricia Hawthorne, Marcus's family friend who'd agreed to officiate, stood beneath the rose arch with her ceremonial robes flowing in. The gentle breeze. She'd known Marcus since he was a child, had watched him grow from the boy who used to hide behind his mother's skirts at charity galas to the confident attorney who now ran pro bono cases for families in need. Who gives this woman to be married? To this man? Judge Hawthorne asked when we reached the altar. Trevor's pause lasted a beat too long. I do, he said finally, but his voice cracked slightly. He lifted my veil, kissed my cheek, and whispered something I couldn't quite catch before, placing my hand in Marcus's. As he stepped away, I caught a glimpse of his expression, and for just a moment, it looked almost like grief. The rest of the ceremony passed in a golden haze. Marcus's vows made several guests reach for their tissues, especially when he promised to love me not despite my background but because of the strength it had given me. My own vows felt inadequate by comparison, but Marcus's eyes never left mine as I spoke about finding home in his arms and learning that love wasn't about deserving someone, but about choosing them every day. When Judge Hawthorne pronounced us husband and wife, the applause was thunderous. Marcus kissed me with such tenderness that I forgot about Trevor's strange behavior, forgot about the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms during the engagement period, forgot about everything except this moment that felt like stepping into a fairy tale. The cocktail hour on the hotel's terrace was a whirlwind of congratulations and champagne toasts. Marcus's business partners from his law firm shook my hand with genuine warmth, though I caught a few glances between wives that suggested I was still being evaluated. His college friends were easier, treating me like family they'd always known. But Trevor kept to the edges of the gathering, nursing a beer and avoiding eye contact with Marcus's relatives. I tried to catch his attention several times, but he seemed determined to blend into the background. When I finally approached him near the stone balustrade overlooking the mountains, he startled as if I'd caught him doing something wrong. "Hey, you okay? You seem a million miles away," I said, touching his arm. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just not used to all this fancy stuff, you know? Makes me feel like I'm wearing a costume." A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. I understood that feeling intimately, but something in his tone suggested more than simple discomfort. "Trevor, what's really going on? You've been weird for months, and don't say it's nothing. I know you too well." Before he could answer, Patricia Holbrook appeared beside us, her smile bright but somehow calculating. "Trevor, isn't it? I don't think we've had a proper chance to talk. Marcus has told me so much about how you raised Celine after your father passed. Such a heartwarming story." The way she said heartwarming made it sound like something she'd read in a feel-good magazine rather than the grinding reality of two kids trying to survive on their own. Trevor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Just did what needed doing," he replied curtly. "Of course. And what is it you do now? Marcus mentioned you work in shipping?" "I'm a warehouse supervisor at Atlantic Logistics," Trevor said, his voice flat. "Been there 8 years." Patricia nodded as if this confirmed something she'd already suspected. "How wonderful that you've found steady work. So important for family stability, don't you think?" I felt heat rise in my cheeks. There was nothing overtly wrong with her words, but the subtext was clear. She was reminding Trevor of his place in the hierarchy, making sure he understood the gulf between his warehouse job and her son's law degree. "Actually, Trevor's thinking about going back to school," I said quickly, though I wasn't sure if that was still true. "He's always been brilliant with logistics and management." Trevor shot me a look that was part gratitude, part warning. "That's still just talk, Celine. Nothing concrete." Patricia's smile never wavered. "Well, it's never too late to better oneself, is it? If you'll excuse me, I should check on the caterers." She glided away, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive perfume and unspoken judgment. Trevor watched her go, his knuckles white around his beer bottle. "Your new mother-in-law's a real peach," he said quietly. She takes time to warm up to people, I said, though I wasn't entirely convinced. She'll come around. Will she? Or will I always be the warehouse supervisor who raised her daughter-in-law above a garage? The bitterness in his voice caught me off guard. Trevor, what is this really about? You've never cared what people like her thought before. He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the mountains where the first hints of sunset were painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Maybe I should have cared more. Maybe if I had, things would be different. Before I could ask what, he meant the dinner chime sounded, and guests began moving toward the main ballroom. Trevor straightened his tie and offered me his arm. Come on, little sister. Time for your fairy tale reception. The ballroom had been transformed into something from a dream. Thousands of white lights twinkled from the ceiling like stars, and centerpieces of white hydrangeas and greenery adorned each table. My place card led me to the head table, where Marcus was already seated, looking impossibly handsome in the candlelight. There's my beautiful wife, he said, standing to pull out my chair. The word wife sent a thrill through me that I hoped I'd never get used to. Trevor had been seated at table 6 with some of my college friends and a few family friends of the Holbrooks. Far enough from the head table to avoid any social awkwardness, close enough to feel included. At least that had been the intention when we'd arranged the seating chart. The dinner service was flawless, course after course of perfectly prepared. Food appeared before us. Butternut squash soup with truffle oil, herb-crusted salmon with seasonal vegetables, and a selection of desserts that looked too beautiful to eat. Marcus's hand found mine between courses, his thumb tracing circles on my palm as his business partner, Richard Sterling, regaled the table with stories from their law school days. But I found myself distracted, watching Trevor pick at his food and engage only minimally with his table mates. Jessica, seated on my other side, followed my gaze. He'll be fine, she murmured. This has to be overwhelming for him. He's never seen you in this world before. She was right, but it was more than that. Trevor looked like a man carrying a weight. He couldn't set down, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was bothering him was about to come to a head. After the main course, Marcus's father, William Holbrook, stood to give the traditional father of the groom toast. He was a distinguished man in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. His success in commercial real estate had built the family fortune, but he'd always been more interested in legacy than money. My son Marcus has always been someone who sees the best in people, William began, his voice carrying easily through the ballroom. Even as a child, he brought home strays, defended the underdog, and believed that everyone deserved a chance to prove their worth. The words were meant to be complimentary, but they landed like stones in my stomach. Another reminder that I was the project, the charity case that Marcus had taken on. When he first told us about Celine, I'll admit Patricia and I were curious. Our son has always moved in certain circles, and here was this young woman from a completely different background, but it didn't take long to see what he saw in her. Celine has a strength that comes from overcoming adversity, a grace that can't be taught, and a heart that matches our son's in its generosity. The applause was warm, genuine, but I could feel the careful construction of his words. He was accepting me while simultaneously acknowledging that I was different, that I had required acceptance in the first place. Marcus squeezed my hand and leaned over to whisper, "You okay? You look a little pale." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Just emotional. It's been a long day." The toasts continued. David Preston, Marcus's best man, shared stories from their college adventures that made everyone laugh. Jessica spoke about our friendship, with characteristic humor and warmth. Then Judge Hawthorne stood, lifting her champagne flute. "I've known the Holbrook family for 20 years, she began. And I've watched Marcus grow into a man of principle and compassion. Finding someone who shares those values, who challenges him to be even better than he already is, that's a rare gift. Celine, welcome to the family. I know you'll bring your own special light to their legacy." More applause, more smiles. But as I looked around the room at the faces of Marcus's family and friends, I wondered if they truly saw me as an addition to their world, or simply as evidence of Marcus's charitable nature. The distinction was beginning to matter more than I wanted to admit. The band began setting up for dancing, and Marcus pulled me onto the floor for our first dance. We'd chosen At Last by Etta James, and as the familiar melody filled the ballroom, I tried to lose myself in the moment. Marcus held me close, his hand warm on the small of my back, and for those few minutes, the rest of the world faded away. Other couples joined us gradually. William danced with Patricia, their movements refined and practiced. David spun Jessica around with theatrical flair that made her laugh. Even some of the older relatives took to the floor, swaying gently to the music. But when I looked for Trevor, he was nowhere to be seen. His chair at table 6 sat empty, his dinner only half finished. A cold feeling settled in my chest that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "I need to find Trevor," I told Marcus when the song ended. "Something's not right." Marcus nodded, understanding immediately. "I'll come with you." We found him on the hotel's side patio, a smaller, more intimate space overlooking the gardens. He was leaning against the railing with another beer, his bow tie loosened and his jacket draped over a nearby chair. When he heard our footsteps, he didn't turn around. "Hell of a party, Celine," he said, his words slightly slurred. "Really something else." "Trevor, how much have you had to drink?" I asked, moving to stand beside him. He laughed, but it was hollow. "Not nearly enough, apparently. Still feels like I'm watching my sister's life through someone else's window." Marcus stepped forward, his expression concerned rather than angry. "Trevor, is there something we can do to help? You seem upset about more than just the wedding." Trevor finally turned to face us, and I was shocked by what I saw. His eyes were red-rimmed, whether from alcohol or tears I couldn't tell, and his face carried an expression of such profound sadness that it took my breath away. "You want to help?" Trevor said, his voice rising slightly. "You really want to help?" "Of course," I said immediately. "Trevor, you're scaring me. What's going on?" He stared at us for a long moment, some internal struggle playing out behind his eyes. Then he straightened up, and I recognized the look that crossed his face. It was the same expression he'd worn when he told me Dad wasn't coming home from the hospital, when he explained that we were on our own now. It was the look of someone about to destroy everything in order to save it. "Then maybe it's time someone told you the truth about your fairy tale," he said quietly. Trevor's words hung in the air like smoke, acrid and impossible to ignore. Marcus stepped closer, his protective instincts kicking in as he positioned himself slightly between Trevor and me. "What truth?" Marcus asked, his voice steady but wary. Trevor laughed again, that same bitter sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, this is Rich, the lawyer asking for specifics. You want evidence, counselor? Documentation? Or are you finally ready to hear what your investigator found 6 months ago?" The color drained from Marcus's face so quickly I thought he might collapse. My stomach lurched as pieces of a puzzle I didn't know existed began clicking into place. The hushed phone conversations Marcus had been having lately, the way certain family friends had started looking at me differently, the sudden interest in our wedding timeline. "Marcus, what is he talking about?" I asked, my voice barely above, a whisper. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it, his gaze darting between Trevor and me like a man caught in a trap of his own making. The silence stretched until Trevor filled it with a slow clap. "Bravo, Marcus. Really impressive how you can stand there looking confused when you've known for months that your wife isn't who she thinks she is." "Trevor, stop," Marcus said sharply. "This isn't the time or place." "When exactly would be the right time?" Trevor shot back. "After she finds out from someone else? After your family's lawyers dig up everything and serve her with papers? Or maybe you were planning to wait until the honeymoon to drop the bomb?" My legs felt unsteady, I reached for the patio railing, my wedding dress suddenly feeling like a costume I had no right to wear. "Someone please tell me what's happening. Right now." Marcus looked at me with such pain in his eyes that I almost told him to stop before he said another word. But I needed to know, even if it destroyed everything. Celine, my father. When we got engaged, he insisted on having a background check done. It's standard for the family, for inheritance purposes, and he ran his hand through his hair, messing up the careful styling. I told him it was unnecessary, that I trusted you completely, but he said it was non-negotiable. A background check. The words felt foreign in my mouth. On me. It was supposed to be routine. Just financial history, employment verification, that sort of thing. But the investigator found discrepancies. Trevor snorted. Discrepancies. That's a nice way to put it. Shut up, Trevor, Marcus snapped, then immediately softened his tone when he looked back at me. The records showed some inconsistencies in your family history. Your birth certificate, your father's employment records, even some of the addresses. You've listed over the years. I felt like I was falling, even though my feet were firmly planted on the stone patio. What kind of inconsistencies? Marcus pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket, his hands trembling slightly. The investigator couldn't verify your birth at Charlotte Memorial Hospital. The records show a different name, different parents. And your father, Robert Novak, his employment at Novak Auto Repair doesn't match the tax records for the business, the SAW. Paper felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds when he handed it to me. Even in the dim patio lighting, I could make out official letterheads, photocopied documents, highlighted discrepancies that painted my entire life as an elaborate fiction. This has to be a mistake, I said, but my voice sounded distant, like it was coming from someone else. People make errors in filing, computers glitch, records get mixed up all the time. Trevor moved closer, and for the first time all evening, his expression softened slightly. Celine, honey, it's not a mistake. How do you know? I demanded. How could you possibly know anything about this? He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were filled with tears that hadn't been there moments before. Because Robert Novak wasn't your father. He was mine. The world tilted sideways. I heard Marcus intake sharply, felt my knees buckle before I caught myself against the railing. The investigator's report fluttered to the ground, pages scattering in the evening breeze. That's impossible, I whispered. I remember him. I remember growing up with him, calling him Dad, his funeral. You remember him because he was like a father to you, Trevor said gently. But Celine, we're not siblings. We're not even related. Dad took you in when you were 3 years old, and we never told you because we didn't want you to feel different, unwanted. The patio seemed to spin around me. Every memory I had was suddenly suspect. Every family story a potential lie. Took me in from where? From who? Trevor glanced at Marcus, who nodded almost imperceptibly. From me. What? I was 17 when you were born. Just a kid myself, working part-time at your dad's shop to help pay for my mom's medical bills. She was dying of cancer, and we couldn't afford the treatments. Trevor's voice cracked. Your biological mother was one of my mom's nurses, Angela Rodriguez. She was young, unmarried, desperate. I pressed my hands against my temples, trying to stop the world from spinning. This isn't real. This can't be real. She came to the shop one day with you in a car seat, crying, saying she couldn't do it anymore. She'd been living with her aunt, but the aunt was moving to Florida and couldn't take you both. Your mother was working double shifts, sleeping in her car some nights, and you were getting sick from the stress. Marcus moved closer to me, his hand hovering near my shoulder but not quite touching, as if he wasn't sure he had the right anymore. Dad didn't hesitate, Trevor continued. He took one look at you and told Angela we'd figure something out. Mom was in the hospital more than she was home by then. and I think having a baby around gave Dad something to focus on besides losing her. But my birth certificate says I'm your sister, I said weakly. Dad had connections at the courthouse from his army days. Back then, it wasn't as hard to adjust paperwork, especially for a good cause. Angela signed over her rights, Dad adopted you unofficially, and we became a family. Mom never got to see you grow up much, but in her last few months, she loved having a little girl to spoil. The memories came flooding back then, but different now, reframed by this new knowledge. The woman I barely remembered, who used to braid my hair and sing Spanish lullabies. The way Trevor and his father always seemed so protective of me, so careful with my feelings. The photos in our house where I looked nothing like either of them explained away as me taking after my mother's side. Angela? I whispered. What happened to her? Trevor's face darkened. She got her life together eventually, finished nursing school, got married, had other kids, but she never forgot about you. Dad would send her pictures sometimes, updates on how you were doing. She always wanted to reach out, but Dad thought it would be too confusing for you. She's alive? The question came out strangled. She was, as of last year, living in Phoenix with her husband and 2 teenagers. She owns a successful medical practice now, does quite well for herself. Marcus finally touched my arm and I realized I was shaking. Celine, are you okay? Do you need to sit down? I looked at him, this man I'd married just hours ago, and felt a chasm opening between us that might never close. How long have you known? The investigator's final report came in 3 weeks ago, he admitted. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you, when to tell you. I thought maybe after the honeymoon, when we had time to process everything together. 3 weeks. I repeated the words like they might make more sense the second time. You've known for 3 weeks that everything I believe about myself is a lie, and you said nothing? I didn't want to ruin your wedding day, I thought. You thought you'd marry me under false pretenses and then deal with the consequences later? Marcus flinched as if I'd slapped him. It doesn't change anything, Celine. You're still the woman I fell in love with. Your parentage doesn't matter to me, doesn't it? I turned to face him fully, and I could see my own reflection in his eyes, pale and ghost-like in the patio lighting. Because your father's investigator sure seemed to think it mattered. And your family's lawyers that Trevor mentioned, they think it matters too, don't they? Marcus's silence was answer enough. Let me guess, I continued, my voice gaining strength as anger began to replace shock. The family trust, the inheritance provisions, they all require verification of family background. And now that they know, I'm not who they thought I was. Suddenly, I'm not suitable wife material for a Holbrook. That's not true, Marcus said quickly, but his eyes betrayed him. Trevor stepped forward again. Actually, it is true. I may work in a warehouse, but I'm not stupid. I've been doing my own research since I figured out what was happening. The Holbrook Family Trust has very specific provisions about inheritance. Bloodlines matter. Family history matters. And if Marcus is married to someone with unknown parentage, someone who might have claims on other estates or legal complications, it jeopardizes his position. How did you figure out what was happening? I asked Trevor. Because 3 months ago, I got a visit from a private investigator asking questions about Dad's adoption records. Then last month, a lawyer from your future in-laws firm called me, wanting to verify family relationships. I put 2 and 2 together. The betrayal hit me in waves, not just Marcus's deception, but the realization that everyone had been moving. Pieces around a chessboard where I was the only player who didn't know the game. So what now? I asked, looking between them. Do I get an annulment? Does the family lawyer swoop in with papers proving I'm unfit for the Holbrook bloodline? Celine, please, Marcus said desperately. I love you. None of this changes how I feel about you. But it changes everything else, doesn't it? It changes your family's acceptance, your inheritance, your position in their little dynasty. Marcus couldn't meet my eyes, and that told me everything I needed to know. "There's more," Trevor said quietly. I laughed, high and sharp. "Of course there is. What else could there possibly be? Angela Rodriguez isn't just some nurse who gave you up for adoption. She's Dr. Angela Rodriguez Caldwell now. Her husband is Thomas Caldwell." The name hit me like a physical blow. Thomas Caldwell was one of the most prominent cardiologists in the Southwest, a man whose medical innovations had made him wealthy beyond measure. More importantly, he was old money Phoenix, the kind of family whose name appeared on hospital wings and university buildings. "Your biological mother married into a family that makes the Holbrooks look middle class," Trevor continued. "And if she ever decides to acknowledge you publicly, if she ever decides to include you in her will or introduce you to her other children, you'd be connected to more money and influence than Marcus could ever offer." I stared at him, understanding, finally dawning. That's what this is really about. It's not that I'm not good enough for Marcus. It's that I might be too good for him. Marcus's face flushed red. "That's not... the money doesn't it?" I cut him off. "Because suddenly your family's investigator is very interested in my real background. Suddenly there are lawyers involved and hushed conversations and secret reports. This isn't about protecting Marcus from a gold digger, is it? This is about protecting the Holbrook fortune from someone who might not need it." Through the French doors, I could see the wedding reception continuing in the ballroom. Guests were dancing, laughing, celebrating a union that was crumbling to pieces just yards away. Jessica was probably wondering where I'd disappeared to. The photographer was likely looking for us for more formal shots. My wedding day, the day I'd dreamed about since I was a little girl, was disintegrating in real time. But worse than that, my entire sense of self was being rewritten by people who'd known the truth all along. "I need to know everything," I said finally. "No more secrets, no more protecting my feelings. If you both know who I really am, then I deserve to know too." Trevor nodded slowly. "Angela's been trying to contact you for the past year. She hired her own investigator to track you down. That's probably how Marcus's family found out about the connection. When two different investigators start looking into the same adoption records, it sends up red flags." "She wants to see me?" "She wants to meet you. She has questions about Dad, about how you grew up, about whether you're happy. She never stopped feeling guilty about giving you up." I looked down at my grandmother's dress, at the pearls that had been in Marcus's family for generations, at the ring that was supposed to symbolize forever. Everything felt borrowed now, like I was wearing someone else's life. "Marcus," I said quietly, "I need you to be completely honest with me. If your family forces you to choose between me and your inheritance, what would you do?" The pause before he answered told me everything I needed to know, but I waited anyway, needing to hear him say it. I don't know," he whispered. "I want to say I'd choose you without hesitation. But Celine, it's not just money. It's the firm, the foundation, everything my family has built. If I lose my position in the trust, I lose my ability to do the pro bono work that matters to me. I lose my platform to help people. Your platform to help people like me, you mean? The unfortunate souls who need charity from the wealthy and well-connected. That's not fair, isn't it?" I pulled off my wedding ring and held it up to the light. The diamond caught the glow from the ballroom windows, fracturing it into tiny rainbows. This whole relationship, was any of it real? Or was I always just another charity case for the golden boy who likes to rescue strays? "Don't say that," Marcus said fiercely. "What we have is real. The investigation, the family politics, none of that changes what's between us." But as I looked at him standing there in his perfect suit with his perfect hair and his perfectly complicated family legacy, I realized I didn't know what was between us anymore. I didn't know what was real and what was performance, what was love, and what was the thrill of crossing social boundaries. What I did know was that I was tired of being the only person in the room who didn't know the truth about my own life. And I was tired of having my worth measured against other people's expectations, whether they were trying to exclude me or include me. It was time to find out who Celine really was, with or without the Novak name, with or without Marcus Holbrook, with or without anyone's permission. But first, I had a wedding reception to get through, and a decision to make about whether I was going to face this crisis as the girl who'd grown up above a garage or as the woman who might be worth more than anyone in that ballroom had ever imagined. Walked back into the ballroom on unsteady legs, my wedding ring clutched in my palm like a secret I wasn't ready to share. The reception was in full swing, guests swaying to the jazz quartet's rendition of The Way You Look Tonight. Nobody seemed to notice that the bride had vanished for 30 minutes, or that she'd returned looking like she'd seen a ghost. Marcus followed close behind, his hand hovering near my elbow without quite touching. Trevor had disappeared entirely, claiming he needed air and time to think. The space he left behind felt enormous, like a crater where my understanding of family used to be. Jessica spotted me first, materializing at my side with the kind of intuition that comes from 15 years of friendship. She took one look at my face and guided me toward the ladies' room, her grip firm on my arm. "What happened?" she whispered once we were alone among the marble sinks and gilt-framed mirrors. "You look like you're about to collapse." I stared at my reflection, surprised to see that I looked almost normal. My makeup was intact, my hair still perfectly arranged. Only my eyes betrayed the earthquake that had just shifted my entire world. "Everything I know about myself is wrong," I said quietly. "Everything." Jessica frowned. "Celine, you're scaring me. What did Trevor say to you? Out there?" Before I could answer, the bathroom door swung open and Patricia Holbrook swept in, her navy dress immaculate despite hours of socializing. She stopped short when she saw us, her expression shifting from surprise to something more calculating. "Celine, dear, there you are. Several guests have been asking about the cake cutting. We should probably get that started soon." Her tone was perfectly pleasant, but I caught the underlying message. Get back out there and play your part. Don't disrupt the performance. "Of course," I managed. "Just needed a moment to freshen up." Patricia moved to the mirror beside me, adjusting her pearl earrings with practiced precision. Weddings can be overwhelming, can't they? So many emotions, so many people watching every move. It's important to remember that some moments require grace under pressure. The warning was subtle but unmistakable. Whatever had happened on that patio, whatever conversation had taken place, Patricia was making it clear that the show must go on. "I'll be right out," I said, forcing a smile that felt like broken glass. Patricia nodded and left, her heels clicking authoritatively across the marble floor. Jessica waited until the door closed before turning to me with wide eyes. "Okay, what the hell is going on? That woman just threatened you with good manners." I wanted to tell her everything, but the words felt too big, too impossible. Instead, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a contact I'd ignored for months, Angela Rodriguez Caldwell. The number had appeared in my missed calls dozens of times over the past year, always when I was busy, always when it seemed easier to deal with later. "Celine?" Jessica pressed. "I need to make a call," I said, hitting the number before I could change my mind. It rang twice before a warm, slightly accented voice answered. "Hello? Dr. Rodriguez Caldwell? This is Celine Novak. I think you've been trying to reach me." The silence on the other end stretched so long I wondered if the call had dropped. Then I heard a sharp intake of breath. "Mija," the voice said, and something deep in my chest recognized the word, the tone, the love behind it. "I've been waiting for your call for 25 years. Tears I'd been holding back since the patio finally spilled over. "I just found out tonight about the adoption, about you, about everything. I'm at my wedding reception and I don't know what to do." "Your wedding?" Oh, honey, what terrible timing. Are you somewhere you can talk? I looked at Jessica, who was watching with growing concern, then at the bathroom door where the sounds of my reception continued without me. Not really. But I need to know. Are you my mother? Yes, she said without hesitation. And I've regretted giving you up every single day since. But I was 19, working 3 jobs, sleeping in my car. Robert Novak saved both our lives when he took you in. Why now? Why are you calling now? Because my other children are grown. Because I'm financially stable enough to help if you need it. And because I couldn't go to my grave without making sure you were okay. I hired an investigator to find you, just to make sure you were happy and safe. I never intended to disrupt your life. The bathroom door opened again, and this time it was Marcus who appeared looking frantic. Celine, people are asking questions. My father wants to start the toasts. And Trevor. He stopped when he saw the phone pressed to my ear. Who are you talking to? I looked at him, this man I'd married 4 hours ago, and realized I was tired of other people controlling the narrative of my life. I'm talking to my mother, I said clearly. My biological mother, Dr. Angela Rodriguez Caldwell. Marcus went pale. Celine, maybe this isn't the right time. When would be the right time, Marcus? When your family's lawyers have finished deciding whether I'm worthy of the Holbrook name. When will your father's investigators have determined whether my bloodline is acceptable? Jessica's eyebrows shot up. What lawyers? What investigators? Into the phone, I said. Dr. Rodriguez Caldwell, I'm going to have to call you back. But I want to meet you. Soon. Of course, mija. Whenever you're ready, I'll be here. I hung up and faced Marcus and Jessica in the suddenly cramped bathroom. The marble walls seemed to be closing in, the floral scent from the arrangements becoming cloying. Someone needs to explain what's happening, Jessica said firmly. Right now. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, destroying the careful styling. It's complicated. Uncomplicate, she shot back. I leaned against the sink, gathering my strength. Marcus's family had me investigated before the wedding. They discovered that I was adopted and that my biological mother is married to Thomas Caldwell, the cardiologist. Apparently, this creates complications for the family trust. Jessica's mouth fell open. They investigated you? Like you're some kind of criminal? It's standard procedure, Marcus said defensively. For inheritance purposes, for legal protection. For people marrying into money, you mean? Jessica interrupted. For people who might be fortune hunters or social climbers. That's not... Marcus started, then stopped, because we all knew that was exactly what it was. And Trevor's known all along that I was adopted, I continued. He's not my brother. Robert Novak took me in when I was 3 because my biological mother couldn't care for me. The whole family story I grew up with was essentially fiction. Jessica sank onto the velvet bench beside the vanity. Oh my God, Celine. How are you even standing right now? That was an excellent question. I felt like I was operating on autopilot, some survival instinct keeping me upright while my mind processed the impossible. We need to get back out there, Marcus said quietly. People will start to notice if we're gone much longer. Let them notice, I said. I'm tired of performing for people who don't even know who I really am. But the reception, the cake cutting, the toasts. The toasts, I repeated, something clicking into place. Who's giving toasts tonight? Marcus looked confused by the change of subject. The usual people. My father already spoke. David gave his best man speech, your friend Jessica. And Trevor asked to say something, though after tonight, he trailed off. Trevor wants to give a toast? He put his name on the list weeks ago. Said he had something important to say about family. A chill ran down my spine. Trevor had been acting strange all evening, drinking too much, carrying some burden he couldn't set down. Now I knew what that burden was, and I had a terrible feeling about what he might say in front of 200 guests. We need to find him, I said, moving toward the door. Celine, wait, Marcus called after me. We need to talk about what happens next, about the investigation, about your biological mother, about what this means for us. I stopped with my hand on the door handle. What it means for us, or what it means for your family's acceptance of me. Both. I can't pretend the family dynamics aren't complicated now. No, I said slowly. You can't pretend that anymore. Just like I can't pretend that you married me without knowing whether I was good enough for your bloodline. I pushed through. The door before he could respond, Jessica closed behind me. The ballroom felt different now, the laughter too loud, the conversations too intense. I scanned the crowd for Trevor, my heart pounding with a growing sense of urgency. I found him near the head table, swaying slightly as he talked to the band leader. Even from across the room, I could see the determined set of his shoulders, the way he kept gesturing toward the microphone stand. He's drunk, Jessica observed as we approached. He's more than drunk, I said. He's about to do something irreversible. We reached him just as the band leader nodded and handed him a wireless microphone. Trevor tested it with a quick tap, the sound echoing through the ballroom's speakers. Trevor, don't, I said, grabbing his arm. Please, not like this. He looked at me with eyes that were clearer than they'd been all evening, despite the alcohol. Little sister, you deserve better than this. You deserve the truth, and you deserve people who love you for who you really are, not who they think you should be. The truth can wait until tomorrow, until we're somewhere private. Can it? Because I've been watching Marcus's family tonight, and I've been listening to their conversations when they think no one important is paying attention. They know about the investigation. They know about your real mother, and they've already decided what they're going to do about it. Marcus appeared at my other side, breathing hard from pushing through the crowd. Trevor, put the microphone down. Let's talk about this rationally. Rationally? Trevor laughed. Like how you rationally decided to marry my sister without telling her you'd had her investigated? Like how your father rationally decided she wasn't worth discussing the results with before the wedding. Conversations around us were starting to quiet as people noticed the tension at the head table. William Holbrook was making his way over, his expression thunderous. Trevor, please, I whispered. Whatever you're planning to say, think about it. First, think about the consequences. He reached out with his free hand and touched my cheek gently. I've been thinking about the consequences for months, Celine. The consequence of staying silent is that you spend the rest of your life not knowing who you really are or what you're really worth. The ballroom had gone largely quiet now, guests turning to face us with curious expressions. Someone dimmed the overhead lights, assuming this was a planned part of the evening's entertainment. Ladies and gentlemen, Trevor said into the microphone, his voice carrying clearly through the speakers. If I could have your attention for just a moment. William Holbrook reached us then, his face red with anger. Young man, I don't know what you think you're doing, but... Trevor held up his hand. I'm Celine's brother, and I have something important to say about the bride. The crowd murmured appreciatively, expecting a heartwarming family toast. I could see phones being raised to record the moment. Smiling faces turned toward us in anticipation. Marcus grabbed for the microphone, but Trevor stepped smoothly out, of reach. My sister is one of the most remarkable women I've ever known, Trevor began, his voice steady despite the alcohol. She's overcome obstacles that would have broken most people. She's built a life of meaning and purpose through sheer determination. She's educated herself, supported herself, and maintained her integrity, even when it would have been easier to compromise. The crowd was nodding along, charmed by what seemed like a loving tribute. I could see Patricia Holbrook relaxing slightly, assuming Trevor was simply giving an emotional but harmless speech about family bonds. But there's something you all should know about Celine, Trevor continued, and I felt the floor disappear beneath my feet. Something the Holbrook family discovered weeks ago, but decided to keep secret until after the wedding. The room's energy shifted, confusion replacing warmth as guests sensed the change in tone. Marcus lunged for Trevor again, but Jessica stepped between them. "Trevor, stop," I pleaded one last time. He looked at me with infinite sadness. "I can't protect you from this anymore, Celine. They're going to destroy you with their secrets and their shame. At least this way, you control the narrative." Then he turned back to the microphone and said the words that would change everything. "Celine isn't who any of us thought she was, including herself." The silence that followed Trevor's words was deafening. 200 guests sat frozen in their chairs, champagne flutes halfway to lips, conversations abandoned mid-sentence. The jazz quartet had stopped playing, their instruments hanging silent as they tried to process what they'd just heard. "She's not the working-class girl from Charlotte that the Holbrook family so graciously welcomed into their fold," Trevor continued, his voice carrying clearly through the ballroom's sound system. "She's not even Celine Novak, really. That's just the name on forged adoption papers." I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Around the room, faces were turning from confusion to shock to something that looked like hunger. This wasn't the heartwarming family toast they'd expected. This was a scandal, served up with their wedding cake. "Trevor, stop this right now," William Holbrook commanded, striding forward with the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. Trevor ignored him completely. "The truth is, my sister was born to Dr. Angela Rodriguez Caldwell, wife of Thomas. Caldwell. You know, the Caldwell Medical Foundation, the family that endowed the new cardiac wing at Charlotte Presbyterian? The people who make the Holbrooks look like they're playing with pocket change?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. I saw Patricia Holbrook's face go white, her perfectly composed expression cracking for the first time all evening. Marcus lunged forward again, but David Preston caught his arm, holding him back. "So when Marcus's family hired investigators to dig into Celine's background," Trevor continued, swaying slightly but his voice remaining steady, "they weren't worried about her being a gold digger. They were terrified she might be worth more than all of them combined." The crowd erupted. Conversations exploded across the ballroom as guests processed this revelation. I caught fragments. "Did he say Caldwell? Isn't that the medical family? From Phoenix? How much money are we talking about?" My legs gave out. Jessica caught me before I hit the floor, her arm around my waist as she helped me into a nearby chair. Everything felt surreal, like watching my life implode from a great distance. "That's enough," William bellowed, his face red with rage. "Security!" But Trevor wasn't finished. "Oh, it gets better." Because while Marcus was pretending to be the noble guy who loves Celine despite her humble origins, his family was secretly negotiating with lawyers about how to handle the situation of their son, marrying someone with potential claims to a fortune that dwarfs their own. Marcus broke free from David's grip. "You're drunk and you're lying," he shouted, grabbing for the microphone. Trevor danced away, surprisingly agile for someone who'd been drinking all evening. "Am I? Then why don't you tell everyone about the meeting your father had with the family attorney last Tuesday? The one where they discussed whether it would be better to get an annulment before or after Celine found out about her real parentage?" The blood drained from Marcus's face so quickly I thought he might faint. Around us, the crowd was getting louder, more agitated. Phones were appearing everywhere, recording the spectacle. I realized with horror that this wouldn't just destroy my wedding day. It would be online within hours, spread across social media for the world to see. "Please," I whispered, but my voice was lost in the chaos. Patricia Holbrook recovered her composure first, smoothing her dress and walking toward Trevor with the calm of a woman accustomed to handling crises. "Young man, you're clearly upset and intoxicated. Let's discuss this privately, shall we?" Trevor laughed bitterly. "Privately? Like how you've been privately discussing my sister's worth behind her back for weeks? Like how you privately decided she wasn't good enough to know the truth about her own investigation?" "That's not what happened," Patricia said, but her voice lacked conviction. isn't it? Then tell me, Mrs. Holbrook, when exactly were you planning to inform Celine that her biological mother has been trying to contact her for months? When were you going to mention that Dr. Rodriguez Caldwell has been working with lawyers to establish a trust fund for the daughter she gave up 25 years ago? Another gasp went up from the crowd. I felt like I was drowning in revelations, each one more impossible than the last. A trust fund, I managed to croak. Trevor turned to me, his expression softening momentarily. $5 million, Celine. Set aside specifically for you, contingent only on proof of identity and a meeting with your biological mother. She's been trying to reach you because she wanted to tell you about it in person. The ballroom exploded into chaos. Guests were standing now, talking loudly among themselves, some even applauding as if this were dinner theater rather than the destruction of a family. I saw several people taking pictures, others typing rapidly on their phones. $5 million? Someone called out from the crowd. More than that if you include the medical practice, Trevor replied into the microphone. Dr. Rodriguez Caldwell built a cardiovascular surgery center that's worth at least $20 million. She's an only child, and her husband already has kids from his first marriage who've been provided for. Guess who that leaves as the primary heir? Marcus finally reached Trevor and knocked the microphone from his hand. It hit the floor with a screech of feedback that silenced the room momentarily. You son of a bitch, Marcus snarled. Do you have any idea what you've just done? Yeah, Trevor replied, steadying himself against a chair. I've given my sister the truth that her husband was too cowardly to tell her. Marcus drew back his fist, and I thought he was actually going to hit Trevor. But before he could swing, a new voice cut through the tension. That's quite enough from all of you. Everyone turned toward the ballroom entrance, where a woman in an elegant black dress was walking purposefully toward us. She was tall, with dark hair streaked with silver and the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. Behind her walked a distinguished man in his 60s wearing a perfectly tailored suit. I knew who they were before anyone said their names. Angela Rodriguez Caldwell and Thomas Caldwell had come to my wedding. The crowd parted as they approached, whispers following in their wake. Someone had clearly recognized them, because I heard fragments of conversation. That's Dr. Caldwell, the heart surgeon. What are they doing here? Angela's eyes found mine across the chaos, and I felt that same recognition I'd experienced on the phone, deeper than memory, embedded in DNA and blood. She was beautiful in an understated way, with kind eyes that looked exactly like mine. Mia, she said softly when she reached me, and the Spanish endearment hit me like a physical blow. I'm so sorry. When my investigator told me what was happening, tonight I had to come. Your investigator? William Holbrook demanded. What investigator? Thomas Caldwell stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority. The same one you hired, actually. James Morrison. He's been working for both families, which is why the information leaked so quickly. Very unprofessional, really. We'll be filing a complaint with the licensing board. The revelation that the investigator had been playing both sides added another layer to the betrayal. I looked at Marcus, searching his face for some sign that he was as shocked by this as I was, but his expression was unreadable. You hired Morrison too? Marcus asked his father. Of course we did, Angela replied before William could answer. When I decided to reach out to my daughter, I wanted to make sure she was safe and happy. I had no intention of disrupting her life, but I needed to know she was okay. And what did you find? Patricia asked, her voice icy. Angela's gaze swept across the Holbrook family before returning to me. I found a brilliant young woman who's built a meaningful life through hard work and determination. I found someone who deserves to know the truth about her heritage and her options. And I found a family that was keeping secrets from her about her own identity. We were protecting her, Marcus said desperately. We didn't want to confuse her or hurt her. You were protecting yourselves, Trevor interjected, protecting your precious family trust and your social position. Angela moved closer to me, her presence somehow both foreign and familiar. Celine, I need you to know that I never intended for any of this to happen at your wedding. I came here tonight because my investigator told me there might be trouble, and I wanted to support you. Support me how? I asked, my voice barely audible. However, you need. If you want to meet and get to know each other slowly, I'd love that. If you want to learn about your biological heritage, I have stories and photos and medical history. And, yes, if you want to be part of my family financially, there are resources available to you. Resources, Patricia repeated, and the word sounded like poison in her mouth. A trust fund worth approximately $8 million, Thomas said matter-of-factly. Plus eventual inheritance rights that could be worth considerably more. Angela never stopped thinking about the daughter she gave up, and she wanted to make sure you'd be provided for. The gasps from the crowd were louder now. I realized that our drama had become entertainment for people who barely knew us, a real-life soap opera playing out at what was supposed to be the most important day of my life. 8 million, someone whispered. More than the Holbrooks have, someone else added. I looked around at the faces surrounding me. Trevor, drunk and defiant but protective. Marcus, pale and desperate, his parents calculating and controlled. Angela, hopeful and guilty. Thomas, supportive but cautious. All of them had pieces of my story. All of them had been making decisions about my life without my input. Stop, I said quietly. No one heard me over the continuing chaos. Stop. I shouted, and the force of my voice surprised everyone into silence. I stood up slowly, Jessica's hand still on my arm for support. My wedding dress felt heavy, the beading catching the ballroom lights like armor. When I spoke, my voice was steady, despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. I need everyone to leave. Now. Celine, Marcus started. Everyone except Marcus, Trevor, and Dr. Rodriguez Caldwell. Everyone else, please go. The reception is over. William stepped forward. Now, see here, young lady. This is still our event, and we have guests to consider. Your event? I interrupted, and something in my tone made him step back. This is my wedding. This is my life that's being dissected for entertainment, and I'm done being a spectacle. I turned to address the crowd of guests, many of whom were still recording with their phones. Thank you all for coming to celebrate what was supposed to be a happy occasion. I'm sorry that it's ended this way, but I need privacy to sort through. Some family matters. Please enjoy the rest of your evening elsewhere. For a moment, no one moved. Then Judge Hawthorne, who had been watching the proceedings with judicial calm, stood up and began applauding slowly. Others joined her, and gradually the crowd began to disperse, though many lingered, clearly hoping to catch more of the drama. Said everyone, I repeated firmly. That includes you, Mr. and Mrs. Holbrook. We'll speak tomorrow when I've had time to process all of this. Patricia's mouth opened in shock. But dear, surely we can discuss this rationally. Tomorrow, I said with finality. William looked like he wanted to argue, but Thomas Caldwell stepped beside me and said quietly, I think the lady has made herself clear. Perhaps it would be best to respect her wishes. The authority in his voice was unmistakable, and I realized that whatever else was true about my biological family, they weren't people who could be easily pushed around. As the ballroom slowly emptied, I was left with just the 4 people who held the keys to my real story. The jazz quartet packed up their instruments in awkward silence. Catering staff began clearing tables with practiced efficiency, as if family explosions were a regular part of their service. Finally, when we were alone except for the cleaning crew, I sat back down and looked at each of them in turn. Now, I said quietly, someone is going to tell me everything. No more secrets, no more protection, no more games. I want the whole truth, starting from the beginning. Angela sat across from me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Where would you like me to start, Miga?" I thought about that for a moment, looking around the ruins of my wedding reception, the destroyed fairy tale, the scattered pieces of my old life. "Start with why you gave me up," I said, "and then tell me why you want me back." Angela reached into her purse and pulled out a worn leather portfolio, the kind doctors carry for important documents. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it, revealing photographs, letters, and medical records spanning decades. "I was 19 when you were born," she began, her accent more pronounced now that the crowd was gone. "A nursing student working 3 jobs to pay for school. Your father was a resident at the hospital where I worked nights in the ER. "My biological father?" I asked, leaning forward despite myself. "Dr. Michael Chen. He was brilliant, dedicated, and completely focused on his career. When I told him I was pregnant, he made it clear that a family wasn't part of his plan." She pulled out a photograph of a young Asian man in scrubs, smiling confidently at the camera. "He was transferred to a hospital in Seattle before you were born. I never heard from him again." I studied the photo, searching for familiar features. The eyes were similar to mine, the shape of the mouth. A stranger who was half responsible for my existence. "What happened after I was born?" I asked. Angela's expression grew pained. "I tried, Miha. I really tried to make it work. But I was living in a studio apartment that barely had room for a crib. I was working 16-hour shifts and still couldn't afford daycare. You were sick all the time because of the stress, crying constantly, and I was so exhausted I could barely function." Trevor, who had been standing silently in the corner, moved closer. "That's when you came to Dad's shop." "I was driving to surrender you to social services," Angela admitted, tears flowing freely now. "I thought it would be better for you to be placed with a family who could provide what I couldn't. But my car broke down outside Novak Auto Repair, and this kind man with gentle hands came out to help." She pulled out another photograph, this one showing a younger version of the man I'd known as my father. He was holding a baby, me, while a teenage Trevor looked on with fascination. "Robert took one look at you and fell in love." He'd been raising Trevor alone since his wife died, and he said the house felt too empty. He offered to help however he could, money for daycare, a room in his house, whatever I needed. "But you still gave me up," I said, not accusingly, just trying to understand, "because I realized he could give you something I couldn't. Stability, a father figure, a big brother who already adored you, and most importantly, he could give you his full attention, while I was still struggling just to survive each day." Marcus, who had been listening in tense silence, finally spoke. "Why didn't you stay in contact? Why let Celine think she was really a Novak?" Angela glanced at Thomas, who nodded encouragingly. "Because Robert thought it would be less confusing for you if you had one clear family identity. He was probably right. You were so young, and the situation was complicated enough. But I made him promise to let me know how you were doing, to send pictures occasionally." She opened the portfolio wider, revealing dozens of photographs spanning my entire childhood. School plays, birthday parties, graduation from high school, even my college acceptance letter. Every major milestone of my life was documented in this collection. "You've been watching me this whole time," I said, feeling a mixture of comfort and invasion. From a distance, yes. Robert would send updates twice a year, along with pictures. I have every school photo, every report card, every newspaper clipping. When you made the dean's list, Trevor sat down heavily in a nearby chair. Dad never told me he was still in touch with you. He thought it was better that way, less complicated for everyone involved. But when he died 2 years ago, I lost my connection to you. That's when I hired the investigator. I just needed to know you were safe and happy. And that's when you discovered the trust fund, Marcus said, his tone carefully neutral. Thomas stepped forward for the first time since the room had cleared. Angela never stopped feeling responsible for you, Celine. When she married me and became financially stable, one of the first things she wanted to do was set aside money for your future. $8 million, I said numbly. Initially, $5 million. But with investments over the years, yes, it's grown to approximately $8 million. The money has always been there, waiting for you. We just needed to find you and make sure you were the right person. How could you not be sure? Angela looked embarrassed. The adoption wasn't exactly legal, Misha. Robert was a good man, but he didn't go through proper channels. He had a friend at the courthouse who helped with the paperwork, but there were no official records. When I tried to trace you through normal means, I kept hitting dead ends. That's why the background check was so confusing, Marcus said quietly. Nothing matched up because the official records were essentially fabricated. I looked at him sharply. When exactly did you find all this out? Marcus ran his hands through his hair again, a nervous habit I'd noticed all evening. The investigator's preliminary report came back 6 weeks ago. It raised questions about your birth certificate and family history. The full report, with Angela's connection, came in 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks before our wedding, and you said nothing. I didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid you'd think I didn't trust you, or that my family's money was more important than our relationship. Wasn't it? The question hung in the air like smoke. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I thought I could handle it on my own. I thought if I convinced my family that the investigation was unnecessary, that it didn't matter who your biological parents were, we could just move forward. But they weren't convinced, Trevor said flatly. My father was concerned about the legal implications. If Celine had unknown family connections, if there were potential inheritance claims or family disputes, it could complicate the family trust. Angela's expression hardened. You mean they were worried I might want something from them? Essentially, yes. When the truth is, Celine has access to more money than your family ever will, Thomas added dryly. The irony wasn't lost on us. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the hotel gardens. The night was clear, stars visible despite the city lights. Everything looked the same as it had hours ago, but my entire world had shifted. What about my biological father? I asked without turning around. Michael Chen. Does he know I exist? I sent him a letter when you turned 18, Angela said softly. I thought he deserved to know he had a daughter who'd grown up healthy and accomplished. He never responded. Does he have other children? 2 sons with his wife. They live in Portland now. He's the chief of cardiology at Oregon Health Sciences University. Another family I'd never known existed. Half-brothers who didn't know I was alive. A father who'd chosen to ignore my existence. This is too much, I said, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. This morning I was Celine Novak, orphan from Charlotte, marrying the man of her dreams. Tonight I'm Celine Rodriguez, secret, daughter of medical royalty, married to a man who investigated her background like she was a suspected criminal. You're still you, Marcus said desperately. Your name doesn't change who you are. I turned to face him. Doesn't it? Because apparently who I am was important enough for your family to hire investigators. Important enough to keep secret from me. Important enough to potentially call off the wedding over. We never talked about calling off the wedding. Trevor. Says your family met with lawyers about annulment options. Marcus's silence was damning. Oh my God, I breathed. You actually did discuss it. It was just a precautionary consultation. My father wanted to understand the legal ramifications if there were complications down the road. Complications like me finding out I have more money than you do? Complications like inheritance disputes or family members coming forward with claims or legal challenges to the family trust. Angela stood up abruptly. Stop. All of you. Just stop. She looked at me with fierce protectiveness. Mija, You don't owe anyone explanations about your worth or your background. You don't have to justify your existence to people who hired investigators to determine if you were good enough for their son. That's not what happened, Marcus protested. Isn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like your family treated my daughter like a potential threat instead of a beloved family member. Thomas placed a calming hand on his wife's shoulder. What matters now is what Celine wants to do moving forward. All eyes turned to me. The bride in the expensive dress, with the complicated family tree and the even more complicated marriage. I looked at each of them. Angela, hopeful and guilty. Thomas, supportive but cautious. Trevor, protective and angry. Marcus, desperate and defensive. I want to know about the money, I said finally. Not because I care about being rich, but because I need to understand what everyone's been fighting over. Angela nodded. The trust fund is yours. No strings attached. You don't have to have a relationship with me to access it. You don't have to change your name or acknowledge me publicly. It's simply money set aside for the daughter I gave up, with accumulated interest over 25 years. And the inheritance? Thomas consulted a document from his briefcase. Angela's estate is currently valued at approximately $32 million. As her only biological child, you would inherit the majority, though we've also made provisions for several medical charities. The numbers were so large they felt abstract, like we were discussing someone else's life. What about my biological father's family? Do they have any legal claims? None, Thomas said firmly. Michael Chen relinquished all parental rights when he ignored Angela's letter 18 years ago. His sons have no legal relationship to you. I walked back to the group and sat down, my wedding dress pooling around me like foam. And what does all this mean for my marriage? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus leaned forward, eagerly. It doesn't have to mean anything. We can put all this behind us and move forward as planned. Can we? Because 3 hours ago, your family was considering annulment because they thought I might be a liability. Now they know I'm worth more than they are. How does that change their calculations? Marcus looked stricken. You think this is all about money? I think everything your family does is about money, Marcus. Your father's business, your mother's social position, your own career track. It's all built around maintaining and growing the family fortune. Now suddenly, I'm not the charity case anymore. I'm the lottery ticket. That's not fair, isn't it? Because I guarantee that tomorrow morning, your father is going to want to have a very different conversation about prenuptial agreements and family trusts. Trevor, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly laughed. She's got you there. Marcus, I bet William Holbrook is already on the phone with his lawyers, figuring out how to get his hands on Angela's money. That's not true, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. Really? Then prove it. I stood up and faced him directly. Choose, right now, me or the family money. Because I'm done being evaluated and investigated and managed by people who think love comes with a balance sheet. Marcus stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like he was drowning. Celine, that's not a fair choice. My family's wealth isn't just money. It's the foundation that supports everything we do. The scholarships, the charitable work, the community programs. And my potential wealth? What's that? I don't know. We haven't talked about what you'd want to do with it. Because you just found out about it 3 weeks ago and decided to keep it a secret from me. Angela stood up slowly. Mija, I think you have a decision to make that's bigger than just your marriage. I looked at her questioningly. You need to decide who you want to be. Celine Novak, the girl who grew up above a garage and married into society? Celine Rodriguez Caldwell, the doctor's daughter with the $8 million trust fund? Or someone entirely new, someone who gets to choose her own identity based on her own values? As she spoke, I realized she was right. This wasn't just about Marcus or money. or family secrets. This was about who I was going to be when the dust settled, and for the first time in my life, I had the power to decide for myself. I walked to the center of the empty ballroom, my heels clicking against the polished floor. The room that had been filled with celebration just an hour ago now felt cavernous, decorated tables standing like monuments to a party that had died too young. I could still smell the lingering scent of roses and champagne, but underneath it was something else, the acrid smell of burned bridges. "I need a minute alone," I said, looking at each of them. "All of you. Just give me 5 minutes to think." Angela looked like she wanted to protest, but Thomas touched her arm gently. "Of course. We'll be right outside if you need anything." Marcus hesitated at the doorway. "Celine, I love you. Whatever you decide, that won't change." After they left, I stood in the silence, surrounded by the debris of my wedding reception. Abandoned champagne flutes caught the crystal chandelier light. Wedding favors sat unopened on tables where guests had fled during Trevor's revelation. My wedding cake, a 3-tiered masterpiece that had taken weeks to plan, sat untouched on its display table. I walked over to it and picked up the pearl-handled knife we were supposed to use for the ceremonial first cut. The bride and groom figurines, on top, looked impossibly naive, frozen in their moment of eternal happiness. With deliberate precision, I cut myself a piece of cake and sat down at the head table to eat it. The frosting was perfect, vanilla bean with just a hint of almond. The cake itself was moist, delicate. It tasted like everything I'd dreamed my wedding would be. As I ate, I thought about the choice Angela had given me. Who did I want to be? The truth was, I'd been Celine Novak for 25 years, and she wasn't someone I wanted to abandon entirely. That girl had worked 3 jobs to pay for college. She'd held her dying father's hand in the hospital and promised him she'd take care of herself. She'd built a career helping nonprofits serve people who needed advocates. She'd earned every single thing she had. But I was also tired of being grateful all the time. Tired of feeling like I had to prove I deserved my place at every table. Tired of people like the Holbrooks making me feel like love was a charitable donation they were graciously providing. The ballroom doors opened, and Trevor walked back in alone. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, gesturing to the chair beside me. I cut him a piece of cake and slid it across the table. "You sobered up fast." Amazing what adrenaline and family drama can do. He took a bite and grimaced slightly. "Rich people. Cake tastes exactly like I expected it to." That made me laugh, the first genuine laugh I'd had all evening. "It's just cake, Trevor." "No, it's not. It's a $300 cake that probably cost more than most people's grocery budget for a month." He was right, of course. Even my wedding cake had been a lesson in excess. "Are you angry with me?" I asked. "For what I said earlier about you not being my real brother?" Trevor was quiet for a moment, chewing thoughtfully. "You know what's funny? I was more your brother tonight than I've been in years. Real brothers protect their sisters from people who would hurt them, even when it costs them everything." "What do you mean, costs you everything?" "Celine, I work for a shipping company that does business with Holbrook Industries. About 40% of our contracts come through Marcus's family connections. After tonight, after what I did to their precious wedding, you think I'm keeping my job?" The reality hit me like cold water. "Oh God, Trevor. I didn't think about that." "I did. But I thought about you more. You've spent your whole life trying to be worthy of other people's approval. I wasn't going to watch you marry into a family that hired investigators to decide if you were good enough for them." I reached across the table and took his hand. "You've sacrificed enough for me already. I can't let you lose your job because of this. Actually, you can help with that." "How?" $8 million buys a lot of career flexibility. You could start your own nonprofit. Hire me as your operations manager. We could actually help people instead of just managing other people's charity work." The idea was so simple, so perfect, that I wondered why I hadn't thought of it myself. You've been planning this. Since I found out about the investigation, yeah. I've been researching what it would take to start a foundation focused on helping families navigate unexpected crises. Adoptions, medical emergencies, job loss, the kind of thing we went through when Dad died. Using my biological mother's money to help families like the one that raised me. Poetic justice, don't you think? Before I could answer, the doors opened again and Marcus walked in, followed by Angela and Thomas. They approached cautiously, like I might bolt if they moved too quickly. "Have you decided?" Marcus asked. I stood up, smoothing my wedding dress. One last time. "I have." Marcus's face was hopeful, desperate. "And?" "I'm keeping the name Celine Rodriguez. Not Rodriguez Caldwell, just Rodriguez. It's who I was before Robert Novak found me, and it's who I want to be going forward." Angela's eyes filled with tears. "Does that mean—" "It means I want to get to know you, both of you. I want to learn about my heritage, meet my half-brothers if they're interested, and understand where I come from. But I also want to honor the family that raised me." "And the money?" Thomas asked practically. "I'm accepting the trust fund. I'm going to use it to start a foundation that helps families in crisis. Trevor will help me run it." Marcus stepped forward. "What about us? What about our marriage?" I looked at him for a long moment. This handsome man who'd swept me off my feet 3 years ago, who'd made me feel like Cinderella at the ball. "Marcus, do you love me?" "Of course I do. Do you love Celine Novak, the girl from the garage? Or, do you love Celine Rodriguez, the doctor's daughter with $8 million? I love you. The money doesn't matter, doesn't it? Because in 6 months, when your family starts pressuring you to combine our resources, when they want me to invest in Holbrook Industries or fund their charity galas, what then?" Marcus was quiet. "And when people ask how we met, will you tell them your wife's the girl whose car broke down outside your office? Or will you say she's Dr. Rodriguez Caldwell's daughter?" "I don't know," he admitted quietly. I pulled off my wedding ring and held it out to him. "That's why I can't do this." "Celine, please, we can work through this." "We can't, Marcus. Because you fell in love with a story, the successful lawyer who rescued the disadvantaged girl and lifted her up to his level. But that's not who I am anymore. I don't need rescuing, and I don't need lifting up." Angela moved closer. "Mija, are you sure? Marriage is complicated, but love isn't enough when it's built on a foundation of secrets and investigations. I deserve better than that. We both do." Marcus took the ring, his hands shaking. "I made mistakes. I should have told you about the investigation immediately. You should have told your family that investigating me was unacceptable. You should have chosen me over their approval from the beginning. I can do that now. I can choose you now." "It's too late, Marcus. The damage is done." I turned to Trevor. "Are you ready to go home?" He nodded, standing up and offering me his arm. "Always, little sister." As we walked toward the exit, Angela called after us. "Celine, wait. When can we see you again?" I paused at the doorway. "How about dinner next week? Somewhere simple. I want to hear about my father, about my heritage, about the family I never knew I had." "I'd love that." Thomas stepped forward. "And the legal arrangements for the trust fund? Send the paperwork to my apartment. I'll review it with my own lawyer." As Trevor and I walked through the hotel lobby toward the exit, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of other people's expectations, other people's money, other people's definitions of who I should be, all of it was falling away. "Any regrets?" Trevor asked as we waited for the valet to bring his truck. I looked back at the hotel, where my wedding reception had become a family revolution. Just one. What? I should have worn comfortable shoes. We drove home through Charlotte night, past the neighborhoods where we'd grown up, past the garage where Robert Novak had taught us both that family wasn't about blood or money, but about showing up for the people you love when they need you most. 6 months later, the Rodriguez family foundation opened its doors in a renovated building downtown. Our first grant went to a teenage mother whose car had broken down outside a clinic, who needed help with daycare while she finished nursing school. Some stories don't end with fairy tale weddings. Some end with women learning they don't need to be rescued because they were never trapped to begin with. And sometimes, the most important family isn't the one you're born into or the one you marry. It's the one you choose to build with people who love you exactly as you are. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.